thrilled to be here, and I'm flattered to be among so many outstanding thinkers and leaders, be this Kelly or Gary or those who are still going to speak like Ravi later on. But more importantly, also those of you who are in the daily grind of making innovation work, who are trying to solve problems, hard problems, typically under very adverse conditions. So it's a source of satisfaction, I have to say. It's a sort of satisfaction and confirmation that some of the work that those of us who are looking at innovation, global innovation, and reverse innovation from a more conceptual or academic point of view, that there's something that we can give back. As you have been hearing, I'm originally from Switzerland, so there's a certain camaraderie, I think, that we share with Canada because we both have a big brother close by. And we also are bilingual by nature, so I'd like to say bonjour, mademoiselle, madame et monsieur, guten Morgen zusammen in Swiss German, 大家早上好 in China, where I have been for the past 10 years. And I can tell you when I first moved to China in 2003, and I've been in China since 1993 on and off, China wasn't necessarily a place where anybody would associate this with innovation or as one of the key agents of innovation, corporate R&D or any kind of R&D really. This is really something that only came up in the last 5, 6, 7 years perhaps. 2003, I was ahead of the curve. Right now, obviously, everybody talks about China. And increasingly, we talk about China as one of the next hotbeds for innovation too. Hence, very importantly, we should talk about reverse innovation because our current perceptions and conceptions of what reverse innovation is supposed to be includes somewhat of a geographical, directional sense as well. So let me perhaps make sure I can manipulate this little device. I mean, I have 2 engineering degrees, so I should be able to do this, right? Let me see. All right, good. Yes. What does this tell us? So this is not the neural network, even though I do have worked on neural networks for a while. I really would like to make a point about what the heck is reverse innovation. And this is something that just this morning when we had a discussion among some of the organizers and invited speakers came out again. It is not very clear what reverse innovation really is supposed to be. And if you look around a bit, related literature, you see a whole bunch of different terms. Whether this is blowback innovation or indigenous innovation or one of our other country neighbors in China, India, Jugaad innovation, all of that these are terms that more or less cover the same thing, but more often than not actually cover something else as well, or exclude certain aspects of it, or include other new aspects of it. So what the heck is reverse innovation really? And with Ravi Ramamurthy here on table 4, he's one of the proponents and one of the early definition providers of reverse innovation. I think we have a chance to perhaps get it right, finally, today, here in this audience, right? With this audience, we can have a definite answer to this question. And I'm going to contribute, hopefully, a little bit. I'm going to make a suggestion what could be part of such a definition, because I have certain issues with the current definition. As much as I appreciate the definition, I think it goes not far enough. All right, so what is the question here? What is reverse innovation? And let me give you a couple of examples here. First, what is this a reverse innovation? Or maybe first the question is, what the heck is this? Does anybody know what this is? Bulldozer. Yes, if you're an ant. Yes, that's right. If you're an ant, this is a bulldozer. It's called a hippo roller, so actually quite close to a bulldozer. If you've ever been tasked to move something like 20 gallons of water about 10 miles over unstable terrain, this would be your option. Rather than carrying it on your shoulder, and in many developing countries where there isn't a lot of water available through pipes, you have to carry your water, you have to go to the source. So this is one way to move water about back to your homes or to your families. This is a South African invention. Is this a reverse innovation? Well, certainly it's a very smart way of moving water around. It doesn't require a lot of technology. But it's very much centered in Africa and for Africa. So purely in the sense of a geographical transfer of the idea, it is not very reverse, even though it comes from Africa. Okay, something with a little bit more technology, the Tata Nano. Is this a reverse innovation? Thinking of reverse innovations, as you may remember it, how it has been defined, this is certainly India-led. Yeah, okay, maybe with some technology input first from other countries, but the ambition is that this Tata Nano is going to change the markets, break up the markets, particularly in other countries where these low-cost cars can really succeed. It's not a reverse innovation, at least according to the current definition, because so far it's been sold only in India and a few other developing countries. So in that sense, it's not yet a reverse innovation. It may be a global innovation, but it's not a reverse innovation. So that brings me to the question, so how have you been defining reverse innovation so far? And let me just quickly peek here to the slides myself, because I have a terrible memory. I have to read this off myself. The traditional view, or the current definition by several people like Emelt and Govindarajan and Ravi Ramamurthy here, innovation is reverse when it is first adopted in an emerging country and only later in an advanced one. And there's a few quotes from various publications that refine this even further. In an emerging market, perhaps later sold in the United States. I know this is here Canada, so apparently we're not included. Or refers to the case when innovation adopted first in a poor country. So apparently this excludes the advanced but not so rich countries, trickling up to richer countries, maybe more of a income definition. When innovation is first adopted, not where it is developed. So really more a market-oriented definition, not necessarily an engineering definition or a science definition. Again, I'm an engineer. So as an engineer, I think that my contributions or the engineers' contributions, those from R&D, is kind of ignored here as well. So I was having a few issues with that, and so did have a few other people's issues with that. And hence, my question here, can we do better? Like, for instance, if you look at a product like this, milk in a pouch by an Italian company, Parmalat, shouldn't that be perhaps a reverse innovation as well? Conceived, developed in Italy, targeted countries mostly in Colombia, now also sold, by the way, in Canada. So that falls under this is in fact a reverse innovation. It comes from Italy, not necessarily one of the breakthrough countries in terms of innovations anymore, but first introduced in Colombia, now introduced also sold in Canada. According to the traditional definition, it is a reverse innovation. Or this one here, the life straw, which is basically something like a straw to drink water from with a filter integrated so that all of the pollution that is usually in water in some of those countries is automatically filtered out and you can drink it safely. A great invention, which is, by the way, now also sold in some of the industrialized countries, Europe and the United States, even though it's been developed mostly in Vietnam, for all places. Who would have thought? So it's not just China and India. There's a bunch of other places out there too. Many other countries with very capable people with problem-solving skills who can put these technologies together for some really great benefit. I think I've mentioned to you, I'm going to run a few examples by you. There will be a little bit of theory interjected because I am an academic after all, so I have to almost do this. But I really like to focus on these examples. Anyway, with these definitions, with these examples, isn't there something that we're leaving on the table? I've hinted at this already. As anybody in here who's an engineer or a scientist, maybe quickly just a show of hands, there are some, and there's a lot of shy engineers and shy scientists in here too, I can see that. So you should really take issue with this definition before. And, first introduced in a developing country market and later introduced in an advanced country market. what's my role here as a technology curator, as a product developer in this? And so far, we've been kind of missing this. And in some cases, actually, it's been explicitly excluded from the definition. So this is, I think, one of the aspects where I think the definition could be somewhat improved. Another aspect of this is obviously an ethnocentric point of view, because we're always looking at this from, and I think we've talked about this earlier this morning already, what is reverse about this? Isn't it perfectly natural for people all over the world to solve problems and put this into new technologies and basically new innovative artifacts, and that they will shift across countries, across geographies? What is so reverse about that? It's an A to B transfer. A to B by itself is not really reverse. It's only reverse if you're stuck in your B mode, basically. Bring your B game, not your A game to it, if you like, and think that everything has to come and gravitate to you. The traditional view, perhaps. And this is, I completely understand where this term comes from, because most of the literature, most of the scientists and the management consultants and business school faculty are working in advanced countries, talking and writing about these topics. It's a natural fallacy, perhaps, to slip into, to think of this as a reverse approach. And there's a bunch of other ones. I'm not going to rattle all of these off, and I'm sure you have some personal objections or personal opinions on this too. But what I would like to say is here, I think we can improve on this definition. And everybody here probably has a little bit of a different improvement in mind. Probably Ravi, as one of the proponents of the original definition, has improvements already. And I have a couple of those as well. And I'd like to say a few words about my improvements. First of all, again, as an engineer, I would say, let's include research and development in this too. Not just looking at first market, second market introduction. Let's include, where's this product developed? Where's the project execution? There's a fair amount of all of these R&D dollars, Canadian dollars that we were talking about earlier, billions, literally, needs to be recognized. There is usually it's 80 to 90% is in product development. So where does that money go? Who works with it? Who applies it? Where and how do we actually take these technologies, these finances, and put it into product development? And even before that, we're not just in product development, we're also in concept development. There's people who have ideas. There's people who put their effort into developing base technologies and core technologies into practice first. So really, I would like to suggest two different earlier phases, the pre-phase and the project phase, to a reverse innovation definition, and make it a somewhat more extended phase of innovation. It's not just 2 steps, it's actually 4 steps. On top of that, as we were talking before, there's a certain geographical or directional element to this. So let's make this as simple as possible, and let's talk about 2 possible locations. Advanced country markets, developing country markets, A or D, to make it simple. And anybody here who is geographically minded will quickly see that if you have 4 phases and match it over 2 different locations, what you're basically generating very quickly is a binary tree. And this is appealing immediately because it makes things simple. It keeps things simple. At the same time, it's also opening up a map of sorts to help classify, to help structure research, to help structure also problems and problem solving eventually. Not all of these trees or leaves actually. And this is basically the idea of an innovation flow from the left to the right, from the concept development to product development to first market introduction to secondary market introduction. That's basically now the notion of a flow, which we did not have in the earlier definitions, which was just basically looking at 2 locations, first, second. That's not really a flow yet. This is like talking statistics, and you're having 2 numbers, and you're calling it an average of some sort if you're adding those 2 and divided by 2. Not yet. You have to have at least 3, maybe 4, before you can even talk about averages here, or means. Same with the innovation flow. So this is sort of a map of global innovation, or global innovation flows, and now we can ask ourselves, which one of those are reverse? What's your guess? Well, I'm going to be quick with this slide, partly also because we're already running out of time, but also because I think nobody really likes definitions of that sort. But basically looking at any time when we are experiencing or seeing a shift from a developing country market to an advanced country market, and it happens somewhere between these four phases. So somewhere there's three shifts that are possible. And it's always from a developing to an advanced country market. Mapping this out, this is what it looks like. There's actually 10 possible ways where we see a D to A shift in the last two phases, in the middle two phases, or somewhere in the first two phases. And we actually have several that are double. And these are actually my favorites I'm going to show in a second. So 10 out of 16 possible global innovation flows have some sort of a reversal of the innovation flow in it. My favorite is this one. And as you've noticed, I'm not introducing a lot of healthcare-related products or technologies, just to broaden the view that reverse innovation can happen elsewhere as well. This is a Fiat, the Fiat 147, which was conceived originally in Brazil. Fiat is an Italian company. But the Brazilian team realized that they were not able, obviously, to go through the entire product development by themselves because most of the core technology resided and still resides in Italy. So they sent this over to Italy. They built a car, but they built it for Brazil. And only after they introduced this car in South America, they realized, wow, this could also work in Italy. It could also work in many other countries where we have similar conditions, similar customers, similar market conditions. So it's actually double reverse innovation. It goes back and forth and back and forth. I like that. Maybe you like that too. Now, what's wrong with the old definition? Nothing is really wrong with the old definition. The old definition is subsumed by this new definition. It's part of that. The old definition, however, only really covers 4 of these global innovation flows because it's very specific to the last 2 phases. Target market, secondary market. And it's kind of fuzzy at best on the first 2 phases and the first 2 transitions. So what about this innovation, for instance? Anybody has been wearing these Vibram 5-finger toe sneakers? No? Yes, some of you have. It's a very cool shoe or invention. It requires a bit of adaptation to get used to. And in particular, athletes, professional athletes, or those who are very good in athletic sports, they like it. They swear it because it's a new feel and grip for the ground when you're running or doing sports. This is an Italian invention, but really most of the product development was carried out in China, and is still being carried out in China, but for global markets. So the target market is really not China or India. The target market is advanced countries. So purely in the old definition, first market is advanced countries. It's not developing countries. But most of the R&D has happened in China. So there is a shift, there's a reverse of innovation, which actually going between 2 different shifts from an advanced country to a developing country, from a developing country back to an advanced country in terms of the reversal of the innovation flow. So in the new definition, that will be part of a reverse innovation. Or this one here, this is a baby stroller, and I would assume that many of you are parents, right? Some of you are parents, many of you are parents, again, shy parents. This must be a Canadian feature. 40% of all baby strollers in the world are manufactured by a company called Good Baby, in China. And that's good because you may think, oh, I didn't know it's made by a Chinese company. Good Baby has one of the best product safety records in the world. They haven't had a product recall in Good Babies, in baby strollers that they have designed in the last 13 years. That's a pretty strong record. Actually, there was such a good reputation in the market about product safety that the American Product Safety Commission sent an executive team over to China in Kunshan, where they're based, to find out whether this is all true and real, whether this can be. And they came back with the conviction that they should adopt the Good Baby standards for product safety in America. Just to give you an idea about some changes that are happening in China with respect to reverse innovation. So this is a good thing if you have a Good Baby-made baby stroller. Designed, developed in China, very often for international markets only, because how parents use baby strollers, whether this is downtown New York or somewhere outback Wyoming, very different requirements. Or what about this one? Now I'm introducing a couple of healthcare-related products. Vicks Honeycuff, which was developed in Venezuela by an American company targeting Latin American markets, Mexico eventually, and then the company realized, oh, we have so many Latin origin Americans also in the United States. We have many people with similar needs also in Europe, so we could introduce this there too. And they have similarities in terms of market needs and market requirements. So that's a reverse innovation, which did not fall under the original definition. And if you're looking at some of the labeling on the top right-hand corner, this DD, AD, and so on, these are referring to the binary tree. Or this one here, Oncovin, which is developed from periwinkle in Madagascar and gone through a few shifts and acquired by an American company, introduced and mostly for the United States initially, now sold also in Africa. So it's a DAAD, meaning the first market was actually in a developed country, and then only secondary goes back into Africa and to developing countries. So by all means, it wouldn't be a reverse innovation according to the original definition, but it's very reverse if you look at the origin of the idea and the science that went into it in the first place, but most of the R&D work was then done in advanced countries. So these examples, these additional flows of reversibility of innovation really cover an additional 6 out of those 16. They may or may not be innovation flows that we are very concerned with in Canada, perhaps, but I can assure you that there's a lot of companies, a lot of people, a lot of politicians and decision makers in developing countries and elsewhere who are concerned with these flows of innovation because they cover some of the contributions that are made in the early stages of innovation in the research and development phases made by developing country companies, developing country innovators as well. And they would like to be recognized somewhat for this as well. Not necessarily financially or anything like that. They do this through the quality of their products. But I think we're moving a little bit away from the ethnocentricity of the concept if we expand the definition of reverse innovation in this direction. Now, just to sum it up, I think with this binary tree, the global innovation model, we can map reverse innovation nicely in it. So basically, we are making reverse innovation part of global innovation. And this may be not necessarily a breakthrough revelation, but it's something that is worthwhile to make a little bit more explicit because we're connecting now to a whole different set of so-called IB theory, international business or internationalization of business theory. And we're connecting it back into the innovation or product development discipline as well. We have an observation here that also local companies can pursue reverse innovation. The traditional approach is really we're looking at multinational companies coming to developing countries and seeing what we can do there locally. But really, it's a lot of local companies like Infosys in India or Wipro in India or Huawei or Haier in China and many other places. They, too, can do reverse innovation in this new definition, at least. From their point of view, it's not necessarily reverse because they create and generate and originate innovation. From our point of view, this may be indigenous innovation. It can be a reverse innovation even if it's not introduced in a developing country first. So this is again where we're expanding and making use of the earlier 2 phases of reverse innovation now defined. And it doesn't even have to go through a developing country at all. It can be a product that's entirely just sold in advanced countries, and it's still a reverse innovation because the reversal has taken place exclusively only in the R&D phases, in the early stage innovation phases. It may eventually trickle back to developing countries or to emerging markets as well, because this is always an ex post definition. And it's always something that we can only say exactly what it is after it's finished or it's been concluded. That's maybe one of the weaknesses of this more complicated, more refined view of reverse innovation. There's a few conceptual takeaways. I think I've mentioned this already. We're looking at flows of innovations, and it's surprising that we have a very bad understanding or insufficient understanding what are flows. At least in management theory, we don't really know exactly what is a good flow. We're looking at actors, we're looking at budgets, we're looking at activities, but we don't really know what is a flow. So maybe this helps a little bit in our understanding what is a flow and what is a reversal of a flow as such. We have, I think, also a stronger representation of developing countries, which I think everybody in this room would agree that this is more than just politically correct. And perhaps somewhat surprising, 10 out of 16 possible global innovation flows are actually reversed in some form. You know, if you've paid close attention to some of the earlier slides, I've actually made a distinction between weak innovation or weak reverse innovation and strong reverse innovation. So it's somewhat of a grading or gradual approach of how weak and how strong it could be reversed. I don't want to bore you with the nuances of this definition. But you know, the more frequently you have reversals in this innovation flow, the stronger really is even the personal perception of reverse innovation should be. All right, I think this is really my main message I have for you. For those of you who are interested in some of the managerial challenges to reverse innovation, and since I've given you some head warning, I will be talking about this. If you're looking at the conference program, I said I would be talking about this. I have at least one slide that looks at the challenges for management. I'm not quite sure if most of you or anyone of you really is in corporate R&D management or innovation management, but basically much at every one of these transitions, there is a challenge that is a global nature. Global innovation, global R&D management is a topic, is a theme that has been studied for like 2 or 3 decades at least. What we haven't really looked at is the reverse innovation nature of this. Most of our problems that we have been identifying, most of the solutions we have been coming up with over these 3 decades has been helping Western multinationals do better business and better innovation towards these developing countries, not looking at the reverse. So there are some aspects to this, particularly in the very early stages. And in the very early stages, they're typically of corporate political nature. So difficult to find local sponsors, difficult to find because very often local support is not there. Corporate R&D means R is usually only in the headquarter, in the home country, very rarely in some of these developing countries, but very often for the early stages of innovation, you need to have that kind of support. That's a disadvantage, obviously, for reverse innovation. Looking at the next shift from developing to first market, or basically market introduction, market ramp up, again, we have a lot of different issues here. One of which is, and not the least, is to what extent is R&D done in one country? How can it be made globally relevant, particularly when the local country, the emerging country, may not be representative of the mainstream markets that the company usually operates in? And to get that message across is not trivial. I mean, we've been looking at the other side of that coin over and over for decades, literally, by trying to help multinationals defeature and localize products for emerging countries. In this case, it's sort of a refeaturing and trying to help local innovators from emerging countries to accept and adopt the mindset of the mainstream customers. And that's perhaps even more difficult than the other way. So this is another aspect that I think needs to be thrown into the overall evaluation of the benefits of reverse innovation. Or then just making a shift from one to the next market. Again, there's a reverse flow in this as well. What sort of innovations would actually move more easily than others? There's usually a pushback from the market owners, the business unit directors, managing directors of countries or businesses in established advanced markets. We're operating on a very different price level, operating obviously on a different cost level, but definitely price level, and as a result have very different margins in mind. And suddenly, even if it's from within the same company, there are these competing products coming in with lower costs, possibly lower margins, and that completely just shakes up your budgeting and your accounting and your product planning and your cash flow projections, and you may not want that. You may not want that. So there's a lot of pushback from established market owners, even within the same company, with respect to reverse innovation. So I'd like to stop it at this point. I'm sure that there may be questions on both the managerial point of view, the conceptual point of view. or just the geographical point of view. And thank you very much for your attention. And it's been a treat to be here, and I look forward to many conversations.